A big part of this job is listening to people and being able to read between the lines and figuring out what exactly they're saying. If they're saying, I just don't have time to manage my own calendar, figuring out what's going on in their operations or what's going on in their mindset that's holding them back. And that's this creative problem solving.
Hello and welcome to the Jumpstart podcast with Jeffalytics. I'm your host, Jeff Sauer. Today, for our 19th episode, we'll talk with Jess Ostroff, founder of Don't Panic Management and virtual assistant extraordinaire. Jess came recommended to me by several former podcast guests, and while we have not met previously, I was very excited for the opportunity. It turns out that while you may not have heard of Jess, well-known marketers all over the world rely on her expertise to make their businesses run smoothly. You see, Jess and her team, including Kim, who has been a delight to work with scheduling my podcast guests, handle much of the behind-the-scenes work for many of the, quote, celebrity marketers that you've seen, heard, and followed over the last several years when it comes to search, social media, and other forms of marketing. It is this behind-the-scenes perspective that makes our conversation so fascinating. Now, I don't want to give away too much in the intro, but Jess has turned being resourceful into a business, a fascinating business that provides a tremendous value to her A-list clients. If you want to learn about entrepreneurship, the value of putting yourself out there, and how to build relationships, Jess will be an inspiration. We recorded this episode while I was teaching in Minnesota during one of my breaks, and this intro is being recorded from my farmhouse in Tuscany. Well, it's not my farmhouse, but rather an Airbnb we are renting for the week as we explore the region. This episode is sponsored by the periodic table of Google Analytics. So the team here at Jeffalytics just released the latest version of the periodic table of Google Analytics at jeffalytics.com, and I have to say it is awesome. The first time we released this was in 2013. We had 65 elements and didn't really go beyond just the visual graphic representation. This year we have 189 elements that make up the table, and each week we are releasing videos that describe the elements on our YouTube channel and embedding them in the table. And sometime within the next year or so we should be done with all those elements. I'm recording these videos as I'm traveling the world and doing stand-up on-camera stuff, and it's really interesting, and the whole experience has been pretty great so far. So you can learn more about that at jeffalytics.com. Now it's time to talk to Jess Ostroff. For show notes, visit jeffalytics.com/Jess. Okay, we're here today with Jess Ostroff. Jess, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to have you on because your background is a little bit different than many of the guests we've had. Maybe not so much a pure marketer, but working with marketers. And so I want to learn about your story, how you got involved. And the first question I always ask people is, how did you know that you wanted to get involved in this industry, whether it's marketing or working with marketers?
Well, if I'm being brutally honest, I will say that when I was trying to choose my major back when I was 17, 18, 19 years old, my main goal was to make money and travel. So that was part of what led me into business school. I also was driven to leadership positions. I was always doing, committees and in charge of clubs and things like that in high school and middle school. And I thought, business, I don't really know what those people do, but I know they seem to have a lot of power and a lot of money. So initially that was my very naive perspective on business, and marketing was to me the most creative side of business. And although I won't call myself any kind of designer or creative in that traditional sense, I like to solve problems. And so I had started doing some more business related stuff at a younger age, and started in the really traditional marketing sense, and quickly realized that I didn't want to work in a big corporation, which was what a lot of my classmates were working toward. They wanted to take a more traditional path of, starting as an intern and moving up into an account manager or whatever, and then, becoming potentially a CMO. And a lot of them were working in finance, banks and accounting firms. And that just sounded awful to me. So I quickly kind of took a different route and actually did a volunteer program through AmeriCorps, which brought me to LA. I started in New York. I went to New York University, downtown in the Village, and went to LA after I graduated and was teaching inner city kids math and science, which is the complete opposite of what I had done in college. But I knew I just kind of needed a break and needed something different from the very competitive nature of college. And I still am and was very competitive and found ways to do other things to challenge myself. I wouldn't say that I was competitive against other people in the nonprofit world. But, I was always coming up with different proposals to get more kids involved with our program and new programs through the actual curriculum, after school programs that we could implement. And that grew to be very frustrating as well, because I realized people didn't move as quickly as I did and I couldn't figure out why. And so I went into, after I graduated from that program, I went into another nonprofit that was helping teenagers and high school students develop their leadership skills, which seemed like the perfect fit for me. And I was working as their social media program manager, which was a position that didn't exist until I got there. Social media was brand new. This was 2009. So Twitter, had just come out a year or so before, and Facebook had been around, but brands weren't really leveraging social media that much at the time. And so figuring out, it was really more of a complete marketing position, trying to figure out how to reach these students in different schools around LA. And I was in charge of that. But again, there was a lot of red tape and there were a lot of people and procedures that I had to go through for what looked like to me no apparent reason. So, and of course I was very young, what did I know? But I felt like I could be a lot more effective somewhere else. And I also realized that I didn't like having people over me telling me what to do, which again seems very naive looking back at it. But
that's a property that many entrepreneurs have, is that they want to be to the point where people are taking orders from them, or at least listening to them versus expecting that.
Well, and I really felt like I knew what I was doing, so I didn't understand why there was all of this waiting before we could implement something. I was like, well, let's just do it. This is the right idea. So I was so not busy at that job that I started, poking around on different social networks for myself and kind of seeing what's going on out there, and connected with a former boss from an internship that was Jay Bear, who would be another great guest on this show. He was my boss when I was an intern at my junior year of college. And he was, I noticed one of these had this bigger Twitter following than a lot of the other people I had seen. And so I had been in touch with him, through email and things. He kind of helped me figure out what I wanted to be doing in my career. But I reached out to him because he had posted a tweet that he needed a virtual assistant. And I didn't know what that was, but I had been his intern, and I knew, I was very good at administrative stuff and organization. And, the marketing stuff I was learning at that time, of course, but I didn't quite know where my place was there yet. So it was kind of a natural progression between being in a position that I was not very happy in and had a lot of free time in, to taking on some freelance projects on the side. And it made sense that I got connected to Jay because of my former internship. So it wasn't at first an intentional push toward getting back into marketing stuff, but it was natural because that was my background, and those are the people that I knew from all of my internships. And internships were really important at NYU. They really encourage that, and they let you set your schedules around your other internships. And I always had at least one, if not two or three different jobs in college. Most were not paid, but I still had to make some money. So, I did restaurants and things like that. And I found that the combination of sitting in an office doing, whether it was lead generation or marketing copy and activities like that, or whether it was, organizing files. And in the time that I was organizing files, I was learning about the clients. Even if it was simple tasks, I was always learning things about what the company was doing and kind of just paying attention to how they did things. The combination of that, and I think working in restaurants, being a hostess, that's straight customer service. So I think having those experiences in tandem made me really appreciate the value of relationships and human connection. So I think I sort of had a unique take from that perspective, because the other thing about NYU students is a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them come from wealthy backgrounds and could take unpaid internships, but didn't need to take a paid job on the side. So I felt like I was hustling, I was doing the unpaid thing, but I was also working in restaurants. But I really think that helped me get where I am today.
Yeah. So basically obviously going back to what you originally wanted to do, and that is to make money and travel. You go out into the world and you're like, okay, well, I chose something that might help me get there, but you weren't utilizing it right away.
Right.
And then, and I actually have a similar background. I got out of college and I wanted to make money and travel too. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but those are things that I definitely had high on my list. And then I went and worked for a nonprofit for the government, or like a government institution, educational institution. And just realized that I was wasting away there, and how slow the cycles were, how slow it was to implement, and how much, like groupthink, people were doing things based on, gut instinct and that type of stuff versus, well, this is how we've always done it. Right. And so I think that I automated myself out of the job within about a year. I had taken all the jobs that I was supposed to do, and I just wrote a computer program to do it. And then basically during the extra time, and I don't know if I can get in trouble for this, I think the statute might be gone, I started working on building my own business. I worked on building my brand like you're talking about, and trying to turn this into a business versus a job. And it sounds like very similar background. Is like, hey, these things, this is how people are doing things, but it doesn't mean it's the right way to do things. We need to change it. We need to make some changes here.
Right. Exactly. I felt the exact same way. It sounds like I was less patient than you were through all that, but I felt exactly the same way. It just seemed, like you said, it seemed like people were making decisions from an idealistic and gut perspective, which is fine when you're already established, but it didn't seem like anybody even had any sort of business background at all. They just wanted to help people. And again, that's great, but I don't think you can run a business just from that. And it gets very frustrating when you are somebody who's more maybe, data minded or just strategy minded, like let's be intentional about what we're doing here instead of just making gut decisions all the time. And that's where it got really frustrating, and where, looking back at it now too, I am a millennial, and I think I had some of that the stereotypical millennial tendencies, especially at that time where I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm too smart for this, and I didn't even like try to work my way up, because I was just like, oh no, I can't do this. But the flip side, I don't think I fall into that millennial thing, because I actually did work for what I have. So, but I had the mindset at the time for sure.
Well, I think it's also, millennial, you can call it that. I'm not sure how the whole millennial argument will shape up. I think it's part is young people, but also it sounds like you have an entrepreneurial mindset. And that is, I see these things and I see they can be done better. And I could just sit there and be unhappy with it, or I can do something about it.
Right.
And I think that this is part of the reason why I love doing this podcast, is because a lot of people that I talk to have that spirit, that entrepreneurial spirit. And also I want to encourage people who are listening, who maybe are thinking about it or on the fence. I want them to hear your story about how you were able to do something about it. Because I think that doing something about it is the hardest part. It's easy to say this is not going well, but doing something and turning it into a successful business is the hard part.
That's true. That's
so
very true.
It seems like your turning point in this was just the type of work you're doing. So you had no idea what a virtual assistant is. And then now, in some ways, looking at your LinkedIn, a lot of the next things you did were virtual assistant. Now you have a company that provides services for people. So how did that progression work? How did you, obviously you had the break with Jay Bear, who I'd love to have on the podcast for sure. He's on my list actually of people that I'd like to reach out to. So
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds like we can make that happen.
For sure.
How does this work? How do you turn this thing into like a career?
So it was very organic, and I think that it was a benefit to me that I was so young. I didn't need very much. I didn't need very many clients to make ends meet. So I had worked with him and I think one other client while I was still working my full-time job. And as like the second I got enough clients to be able to pay my rent, I quit. And
Nice.
I just, I was so miserable that I couldn't sit in that office anymore. And, but a lot of people don't have that luxury. And I think that there is something to be said about doing your full-time job or whatever you're doing to make the financial ends meet, but then working your butt off on the side, whether it's during your lunch break or at night. I mean, I know people who have done that for years and years, and then finally, felt like they had enough to break away and do that full time. But I probably jumped the gun because I didn't have I didn't have any responsibilities. I didn't.
Yeah.
So
a lot less to lose
exactly,
at that point.
Exactly.
Right?
And I always knew that I had people that I could go stay with family or I could do whatever if for some reason I couldn't pay rent. But I did that as soon as possible. And basically, it was all through word of mouth. It was working with Jay and it was also the timing, I think. I graduated in 2008 and the economy was terrible. So a lot of my classmates weren't getting jobs. I was getting jobs, but they weren't, obviously what I really wanted to do. And, but also people were getting laid off. And as a result, a lot of people were starting their own things just out of necessity and needed help. And so that's where I kind of fit in. And I think that the virtual assistant thing had been around, but it was in a much different capacity. People that I have talked to were using assistants just like task rabbits, which is now a service,
yep.
But literally just giving them tasks and saying, go do this and thank you and goodbye, not having any sort of relationship. And I didn't think too much about that because I knew I would never be that. I knew I couldn't just work with somebody and not care about them. So, so that's kind of where my start came, was getting deeper into what the client was working on and figuring and kind of defining my value to them. They didn't really know what I could do or couldn't do, but I would look at everything and say, actually, I can help you with this. I can help you with this. I can help you with that. And I think that was really what got things kicked off and getting big, because I wasn't just clocking in and clocking out. I was actually looking deeper into their entire business operations and making myself useful. Which I think really, that came back to what I was doing in the restaurants. I was bussing tables and I was running food and I was talking to clients. I was doing everything. And I always felt like I had to be busy. And it was the same thing when I started working on my own. I was like, all right, well, I can't just do 5 hours a week if they have more work. I need to do more than that. And, it was just that kind of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed ambition that you can't really teach. I think you kind of just have it or you don't. But you can cultivate it. If you do have a spark of it, you can definitely cultivate it and you can practice that. And I know you've talked to other people about trends and kind of how they, I haven't done that as much as I have just listened to people and being really intentional about what they're saying and the biggest problem I have with clients now is they don't know what their problem is. And so it's hard to help someone when they know they need help, but they don't know what they need specifically. So a big part of my job then and now is listening to people and being able to read between the lines and figuring out what exactly they're saying. If they're saying, I don't have time to go to my kids' recital, or I don't have time to cook dinner, a healthy dinner for my family, or I just don't have time to manage my own calendar. Sometimes it's very simple and sometimes it's very complex, but figuring out what's going on in their operations or what's going on in their mindset that's holding them back. And that's where my skills and my team tries to fit in. So it's less about here's something to do. It's more about this sort of creative problem solving, which I always wanted to do anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'll have to admit that when I think of a virtual assistant, I have one view in my mind as to what that might be, and a lot of it has to do with somebody in the Philippines who is getting paid a decent wage for them, but very inexpensive for the United States, and you make up for maybe the quality of the work. And I don't mean to be negative about. I mean, there's some great VAs in the Philippines that are inexpensive, that do great work. But the general perception is you make up for quality with quantity. Like they might not be able to enhance. They might not be able to do things the exact way you want it, but it's so inexpensive you can sort of absorb that.
Right, and speed as well. So a lot of times they can do things really quickly for you, so that you can work on other stuff and then come back to it or whatever your processes.
Exactly. And you're adding a more value. I mean, this is a completely more value added service. And so it seems like virtual assistant can run the spectrum as to what you do and what the responsibilities are. And it ultimately just is somebody who's taking on the tasks that somebody may not have time to do, or helping them get to the certain point. But it seems like you've expanded that well beyond that definition, and we're able to expand it to a level that becomes much more value added.
Yeah. I mean, you're not alone in your perception. And I think that's a big issue for us and my company right now in terms of branding, because we're not really virtual assistants. We're more like an extension of the team. And the fact that so many companies now are virtual, or at least have remote workers, that part of it doesn't seem as important, the virtual part. So it's because it's so common. A lot of people work from home. A lot of people work, do freelance stuff part-time for several different companies or have different clients. And so that's definitely something we're always thinking about and working on. How can I explain what we do in a way that doesn't give people that sort of connotation, because it's really not, it's not somebody who sits on the other end of a computer and doesn't have a face or a voice. We're an extension of your team. We're a partner to you, and we actually care about you. And that's where I think that's where the value add is. And that's where, the work that we do is not hard. That's not the point. The point is that it's work that a business owner or an entrepreneur or a manager should not be doing, because they are not uniquely qualified to do that. They should be doing the business development. They should be doing the strategy and all this. And but unfortunately there are all these other things in their wheelhouse that they have to be responsible for. And our goal is to take those things off of their plate so that they have more. I mean, it's really about developing more brain space for people and finding an efficient way to do that doesn't make more work for them. And that's one thing that we talk about a lot, and we try to figure out with clients. That's how we figure out if it's a good fit or not, honestly, is if that's one of the ways, is if they're finding that they have to manage us, then that's not going to be good for them, because it's still taking up the same amount of brain space. Like, did that thing get done? Is it ready? Do I have to approve it? Whatever. But if we can genuinely and efficiently take off, even if they do have to approve it, which, we're really adamant about never publishing anything or posting anything without approval unless we've been working with the client for years and years.
Yep.
So they do have to spend a little time, but that time compared to the time that they would spend doing it on their own. I mean, we've had clients, speaking about, marketing and Twitter and everything, like we've had some clients who've been like, it took me 30 minutes to write a tweet. And we're like, okay, that's a problem. You should clearly, this is not something that you should be doing. When you can get up on stage and deliver a life-changing speech in 30 minutes and make $10,000 for that, you should not be sitting in front of Twitter writing a tweet in that same amount of time.
And I think that's the thing, is that these people that you're working with, they obviously see the value, and it doesn't really matter what you call it, what you're doing. Right. It's ultimately giving them time back, giving them relieving them of stress, managing the details, getting things going, and adding value. I mean, that's the big thing, is you're just adding value to whatever you're doing for them. And I think that's the nice part, is that that's all you need to do, and you'll have long lasting clients. That's all you need to do. And you can build a company off of it. You can build a company off of delivering that success, as long as you can define what that is and be consistent with it.
And isn't that funny that you say that? Because that's what people keep talking about marketing is all about now. I mean, adding value, it's like, duh. I mean, I can't stand this stuff right now, because it's just, and maybe it was a couple years ago more so people have moved on more to storytelling today and putting data behind stories and all that. But when I first started hearing that the next wave of marketing was being helpful, I was like, are you kidding me? Like that's life. That's business. That's everything.
That's table stakes. Yeah. That's exactly. Well, that's the thing, is I think that it's almost like people have been doing that forever. Right. The Lee Odins, the Jay Bears, the Ann Hanleys of the world, the ones that you've been working with, Brian Clark, they've been doing this forever. And it was before it was even like, before we put any kind of words behind it, that's the type of stuff they've been doing. And I think that's what a marketer is they're creating value, and they're creating something that people want. And it doesn't matter what the format is or the medium. It could be a podcast. It could be a blog post. It could be a book. It could be a speech. They're connecting with people. And so you're right. When now that becomes the buzzword, and that let's be helpful, let's be genuine, all that type of stuff, like that was always the table stakes. That was always, you had to do that just in order to be out here. It's not anything new. But the problem that I see is that there's a lot of imitators out there, people who are trying to do this in order to, as a gimmick, right? Like, they're not doing it out of a genuine need or desire to help people. They're doing it because they want to exploit what's out there. And that's the problem that I end up seeing with a lot of this, is that that's not really the value that we're going for.
I think about that a lot, because there are a lot of people, we've touched a lot of people at this point. I started doing this in 2009, but I officially launched the business in 2011. So, it's been almost 5 years. That's a lot of time to be working with clients. And our entire growth has been due to word of mouth, and maybe some of the writing that I've done, and maybe some because of people searching on LinkedIn, but generally it's people who know people. And I've had people in the past who have referred somebody to us, and they just don't necessarily get it. And I'm not in the business of just trying to shove my services down people's throat. I never have, and I mean, I've definitely, I can't say that I've never taken a client that I didn't really want to work with, but now especially we're at a point where if it's not a good fit, it's not going to work for anybody. It's not going to work for the client, and it's not going to work for us. And like I said before, I mean, I think the relationship is everything. And if we don't have a good relationship, and we don't have that trust and that mutual respect, it's not going to be successful. But sometimes what marketers do is try to shove the thing that they're promoting down people's throats who don't need it. And I don't know why they think that's a good idea, because it just makes people resentful, and it makes people distrust them. It's the same thing, whether you're a product or a service business. When you try to, make a match with someone who's not a match, it's a disaster.
Yeah. Well, that's the tough part, is that I think a lot of marketers preach these things, and then they're the worst ones at actually doing it. Like talking about, if you're not doing one-to-one marketing in 2016, then you're not marketing. And it's like, okay, well, what? And then they send the same message to everybody, and they don't really do any segmentation or any kind of, they don't cater it to their audience. And so that's the difficult part of all this, is that it's hard to get it all done. That we all have good ideas, and we all agree. I mean, it's hard to not agree with a good piece of marketing. It's hard to not agree with, you should do these things. The hard part is putting it into action. And I think that's really where your spot is in this, is that you help people put it into action, and you have a team to build that out. And that's, and obviously, I don't want, like, virtual assistants is it's what it is, right? That's just a term that we use for the things. But that's sort of what I wanted to get into next, is how did you go from doing one gig with one person to, networking, to meeting people, to the point where you have or you turned it into a business that's not just you, but you and a team. How did you get to that point? How did you do that?
It's a good question. It feels like it just happened. It doesn't feel like, but I think it definitely grew very organically. And like I said, it just happened to be a good time. I mean, I think that I saw an opportunity and took it, but it helped that it was this time where people were getting laid off and starting their own thing and all that kind of stuff. So being early in that place when people were starting their own agencies, their own consultancies, that was definitely helpful. But really I think just being interested and being open to talking to people. And I think the most important part of my business and success, I think, is the trust and the credibility that we might screw up. I mean, we try to do everything we can to do things right every single time. But the bigger thing about that is taking ownership for mistakes and making it feel like we do care about you. So I think that sense that I had was, I didn't know this at the time, but was unique because other people I had talked to about work and about their experience with hiring people were like, well, they told me these crazy stories. Like, well, I paid this assistant for a month of work and then they disappeared. Or this person made the same mistake week in and week out. And I mean, just crazy things like that, or like that would never cross my mind to even consider. And there were people out there that were being dishonest and screwing people over. And so I think just the nature of who I was a big part of it, because all I had to do was not be a jerk at first, which was sad. It was sad that that's all it took. But then, honing in on the skills and I think the processes that we've put into place are really, really, really important because people, it's called Don't Panic Management for a reason. People are panicking when they come to us. They're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to get anything done. I don't know where anything is. I have Dropbox. I have Drive. I have email. I don't know where and so part of it was having that organizational skill that I could help get people's minds in the right place and then as a result, get their files and their systems and everything in place. So doing a good job of literally on the personal level, making people feel better, but then on the back end of their work, making them feel more organized and calm. That was the value that people saw. It wasn't like, oh, great, you created a social media calendar for me, or, oh, you wrote a blog post for me. I don't think those were the specific things that made people want to keep working with us. I think it was the feeling like Jess has my back. If I get stuck in an airport at night, I can text her and she'll figure something out. I was doing stuff like that. I was working 24/7. Like I was by myself, so all of my clients, I had a combination of marketing and admin clients, but they were all like, I was on call, I was like a doctor. Come into the emergency room if so-and-so doesn't have a hotel room and they just landed and it's midnight. So I think just putting everything into it at the beginning was really important. And then I started hiring people when just as soon as I felt like I couldn't do it all. Because I do believe in having a life outside of work. And, that's where that travel and all the other stuff comes into play. I wanted to build something, but I didn't want to build something that was so reliant on me and my time that I couldn't do anything else. Yeah. So
I think that's a good realization to have too, because I think that a lot of people go into this and I like what you're saying about just doing what you'd expect somebody to do for you. And it's really, instead of being a hired gun or a resource that you just throw stuff over to and then get the results, it's more of a team member, right? So I'm part of your team, and as part of this team, this is my role. And I know that you're going to have happiness with that. And that's really, believe it or not, most people don't realize that. They think that if they're getting paid to do something, that's enough, like to do it. And they don't really take the investment to understand what's being done. It's really, they're doing stuff without context. And I think that the context, the problem is though, it's not so much that the person doesn't want to have context. They might not know how to ask for it. They might not have the skills to do that, or they might think that since they're only getting paid to do that, that's not their job. The other person is supposed to be supplying that. So I think it does come a lot from the person who's doing like saying, here, do this. It's part of on them to give context, but then it's part on the other person to ask for context.
I agree.
And it seems like the reason why you're probably so successful is because you're like, well, I can't do one without the other. And so you put processes in place to get that out of their brains as part of doing the project. I can't work with you unless you give me the reins that I need in order to get it done.
Right. Well, and that's what I've also, people, especially when I was getting started in 2008, 2009, 2010, it was always like, find your passion and follow your passion and all this stuff. And that always rubbed me the wrong way. And I couldn't figure out why. But in the last couple of years, I realized it's for me, it's more about the purpose. It's why am I helping this person? Why do I care about them as a person? I'm more, I guess, passionate, you could say, about people than I am about any work I could ever do. I mean, people say, I love to work. I work all the time. I think that's bullshit. I think people like to spend time with their family. They like to do stuff, they like to have human connections. And yes, sometimes the work, you're blessed enough to work with people that you really like so that as a result, you enjoy the work. But that was what I realized very quickly, that what you were just saying about context, I needed that to have a purpose in order to do something. And so I needed to know the people a little more. And that I spent a lot of time, especially in the beginning, going to conferences, going to events. I had moved after I was in LA and started to get more focused on the fact that I knew I did want to start a business. I moved to South Florida because my family has a house there. That was really the only reason. Nobody was living there. So I didn't have to pay rent. So I could focus all of my time and effort and money on putting it into the business. And I went to, Social Media Club of South Florida. I did the startup bus from Miami to Austin to South by Southwest one year. I knew I wasn't like a startup, like tech person, but I just wanted to meet other people that were doing business stuff and starting their own thing. So, I did all of that stuff. I did as much of those things that I possibly could. And to this day, those are my people. Like those are the people that are in my corner and have been in my corner from the beginning. And, I know people always say it's like, oh, network, but I don't even like to call it that. For me, it was like, you need to ask more questions than give answers.
Yep.
And so for me, it was a genuine interest in what other people were doing and how they were being successful. I remember, there's another great guest for your show, Joe Pulizzi from Content Marketing Institute. I remember, I think it was 2010 or 2011. I was at Content Marketing World. And I think I just did one of those things where I slept on the floor of someone else's hotel room because I couldn't afford to, I couldn't afford to get my own room, but I was just always talking to friends and where are you going to be? If I come there, can I sleep on your couch? It was always and same thing with South by, I didn't get a badge. I would just go to the parties and stuff. And find cheap ways to stay there. But I remember I was really getting into, I think I had decided on the name of the business, but that was about it. And I asked Joe, he was like, I'm so proud of you. You're doing this. And I was like, yeah, but how do you do it? After all these years, Joe, how do you know what to do? How do you know what decisions to make and where to go? And he was like, Jess, I don't know if he would want me to even say this, but he was like, I don't know. And he was like, you just do it. And that really, yep. For me, it was like, okay, maybe this is now where the gut, I've had this experience. I know how to run a business. Maybe now this is where the gut comes into play. And it took, those 2 years or whatever of crashing on people's couches and doing events and doing whatever I could to kind of absorb all of that knowledge and all that experience from other people. But at that point I could say, okay, I'm going to just do what I think is right for me and for my business and see what happens. And to this day, that's still what I'm doing. And for me, again, it's all about the people. So finding clients that I think will be a good fit, but also hiring people. That's the hardest part of this job is hiring because nobody is me. Which is good. Everybody has different skill sets and there are a lot of things that I'm not that good at that other people are really good at. And so being able to create a team that not only can do the work, but has that thing, that we were talking about before that you can't really teach, that caring and that sense of responsibility and that need to do a good job, whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't say, hey, you need to be on call. But if your client calls you and they're stuck in an airport, you need to help them. Or if you can't, and I'm not paying you extra for that. That's just part of your job, And so it's hard to find people where they want to go that extra mile just because they want to, not because they're getting paid, not because they're getting recognition. I mean, so much of what we do is behind the scenes. A lot of people don't even know we exist. Yet we're writing on behalf of CEOs for entrepreneur.com and Forbes.com, or, doing all the behind the scenes social media, or booking all of the speaking gigs. But that's where I like to be. I would rather be running the show than being on stage for the show.
Yeah. Well, and I think that in the reality is that how many people are going to be on stage? There's only so many positions for that. And there's a lot more opportunities to work with people around that. And I think that there's a great deal of satisfaction in knowing that this is all happening because of things that you're doing, because you cared, because you helped them get there, because of all that. And I think that's the key to all this and that's what I'm taking away from this part, is that it's not so much whether you're the idea person or you're the one who executes it or makes it work. It's really about that it got done and that it got done well. And you're opening up my eyes to a world that I know exists, but I didn't really know how it came from your perspective. And so it's really interesting to see that, is that behind every person you might see on stage, there might be several people working to make that work well. And that's the cool part, is that there's, not everybody's going to be the one who goes up and does keynote speeches. In fact, most of us won't be. But that doesn't mean you can't be involved with it. Doesn't mean you can't get the same thrill and the same level of satisfaction by working with it. And it seems like, I like what you said about networking too. It seems like, some of us are just, we network and don't even know it. It seems like you network and you're not even trying to do it. You're just like, I just want to go to these things. I want to be around people, successful people, all types of people. I want to be there. And then that's where the relationships are formed. So you're more just like, I just want friendships and relationships versus I'm intentionally networking. I'm going out there and trying to find.
Right. Well, I mean, people are not idiots, right? Like if you are going for that purpose, you can tell. Like it seems so simple, but people don't get it. Like you're being gross. Like when you're just trying to quote unquote pick this guy's brain, really you want a job or really you want him as a client, like he can tell. And for me, I first, I mean, I don't think I ever did that. I hope I never made anybody feel that way. But I genuinely just wanted friends and wanted to find my people, figure out who these people were that I could really resonate with, and that was another part of why I left LA actually, is because I felt like people didn't understand what I was doing or why I was doing it. Like why, they're all, a lot of my friends at the time were actors and musicians, which is awesome. And I love music and I love art, but wanting to start my own business was like very foreign to a lot of people that I was hanging out with. And I was like, okay, well, there are people out there who don't think this is weird, so where are they? Yeah. I think and that's human nature, right? It's finding your tribe, finding people that you can connect with. And at first that's all it was for me. And what it turned into was, after the event, going to grab a drink at the bar or going to see a show or, finding a common interest that wasn't just business. And those are the people, again, that have been in my corner and who have been clients either on and off or are still clients. Some of my clients I've had for 6 years, which feels like a long time in the internet world.
It is. It really is.
But I think it's because like I can sit with them and have a glass of wine, or I can, go to Mexico with them or whatever. Like at the end of the day, we're friends and business is business, and we want to do good work together, but we actually care about each other. And that's the way, whether it's a virtual assistant company or a widget company or a marketing company, people can tell when you care about them and want to help them and when you're just trying to get something from them.
Absolutely. Well, I think and it's easier to tell that when you're physically there. So, I'm what we call a digital nomad. You're a virtual assistant. We put that in our titles, but the relationships we build are the best ones are the ones where either you can, the things that happen outside of work, like being at having a happy hour or seeing somebody, meeting somebody, seeing how they react to things. That's really how these relationships are built. So even though we are both pretty heavily on that. We can work from anywhere. We can do anything. We just want to travel and make money, that type of stuff. A lot of it comes down to having met somebody and having them be able to trust you and to read you as a person and to understand who you are. And for me, it's been the same thing. Every time that I've gone to a conference or met people or networked or gone out for drinks afterwards, that type of stuff, that's really where these relationships are. A lot of the guests that I've had in the podcast have come from meeting them in person. It's a lot easier to reach out to somebody either after you've met them in person or when you're talking to them in person. Hey, would you like to be on the podcast? I'm not trying to pressure you or anything like that, but hey, if you can find some time, it would be great. Your response rate there is much higher than cold emailing. Or my favorite is when somebody with a sales title befriends you on LinkedIn and you accept begrudgingly because somebody else accepted them, and then you get a sales email 2 seconds later.
Right. Well, that's why I hate about that. It's like, do you think that I'm stupid? That's how I feel. I feel like it's a personal attack. I'm like, this person thinks that I'm an idiot. And I don't like feeling like that.
Yeah. Or they think they're growth hacking because they're emailing 100 people and getting one yes, as opposed to just emailing one person and getting one yes. This will bite me this will come back to haunt me at some point. But when I started this podcast, I reached out to 10 people. I made a list of 10 people I wanted to talk to, and I got 10 yeses.
Wow.
Which is almost unheard of in this world.
Yeah.
But it was because of the approach. It's like, I don't send out an email to 100 people asking them to be a guest. I talk to the one person about why I want them to be a guest, because it's like, here's where you're adding value to my audience. Here's why I want to talk to you. And like, that's common sense to me. It's because like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that person who does anything other than that. That's all that I know to do. I think that the hard part is like, obviously it's very intuitive to you and natural to you. And that you've made a business out of it, which is great. I think the hard part for many others is either being scared to do it or afraid of the results that are going to happen or just it's maybe not in their skill set. And so I think that's part of where you just got to find out what you're comfortable doing.
Well, I think part of it too is just like there was this way of sales or this way, and I guess I wasn't exposed to it, but it seems like there was something happened somewhere where people thought that this worked. Like people wouldn't be still doing it if it didn't work. So at some point it worked, or people were just delusional about it. I don't know. But it's like there are some people I think who are just stuck in those ways and can't figure out, the which again, quote unquote, new. I don't think it's a new way to do business, but it's maybe different from what their sales team or what their training or whoever was in charge of making these procedures and processes. It's too different from what they're doing. Yeah. So they just keep doing it, even though times have changed and all of that.
Yeah. I think a difficult part of it is scale too, is that it's hard for us to scale these types of high touch businesses beyond a certain amount of revenue and employees. And I think that at some point you do, like I would love to build every business through word of mouth, but that usually gets you to about 10 to 20 employees. And then after that, you do need to have a marketing focus, right? That's where it's possible. So a lot of people are like, hey, they'll ask me if I can do marketing for their, 5-person company. I was like, I don't think you need me. You can't afford me. And that's not really what we're going for, because you can just scale this based on doing just doing good work. But eventually you do need the professional marketers to get there. And that's where that comes in. Great. So we're almost at the end of our time, but I want to, obviously, your company, maybe just give us a little bit about what your company does. Do you have like in a nutshell version of what you do?
Sure. So again, we've evolved so much, and I liked, some of the other people you've talked to, it seems like they've evolved too. And that's part of why they're successful. The landscape has changed so much since I've started, doing initially blog post research for people and writing the bare bones of their posts. We still do a lot of that kind of stuff, but now we also do, social media management and social media advertising, kind of anything. The things that we focus on are in the two arms of our business are administrative assistants, which many of our clients are public speakers or writers or entrepreneurs, people who have a lot going on and need help managing their schedule or their invoices or booking their travel and things like that. And then we also, our content arm, which includes copywriting, blog writing, blog management. A lot of our clients have multi-author blogs that they need help just making sure nothing goes off the rails and, formatting in WordPress or any CMS and things like that. And then also social media management. And it's kind of, I was thinking about what you said before, where the people who, there are a lot of people who preach these best practices and all these different things that their clients should be doing or that their partners should be doing, and they don't do it themselves. Part of it is really that they don't have the time and they don't see the value for themselves because they have enough clients. They're not trying to grow their business necessarily. And so that's the first thing that goes is your own promotions and your own content. And so a lot of the people that hire us help them do their internal content. The other reason I think they hire us is because they're so close to it. They get, like that person who spent 30 minutes writing a tweet. She was just so worried about what she was going to say and how it was going to come off and all this stuff. When in the reality, and, I talked about this, it's like your tweet doesn't matter, but your, 100 tweets over the course of a week or a couple of weeks, those matter, and you need to keep consistent. And so we do the marketing kind of execution side of things. We also do, we write email newsletters, templates, things like that, anything that's related to marketing execution. And we focus on that because there are 1,000,001 strategy companies and there are not a lot of people out there who want to actually get their hands dirty at work. So there really is, I think, a niche there and an opportunity there for us, or for anybody really who wants to do that. But we work so closely with the strategy side, and we also do reporting. We don't let our work exist in a vacuum. But the bigger thing, so those are kind of the tasks that we do. But like I've been talking about this whole time, the bigger thing that I think we provide is a sense that we care and a sense that the work that you want us to get done will get done on time and well. And my whole goal with the company is living up to that promise. So I think there's the tangible tasks, but there's that intangible feeling that we try to provide.
That's great. I mean, I think you're right. That's the feeling that people want to get out of this, is like not panicking, knowing that there's something that's being taken care of. And I think that's really what every business owner wants. I'm going through it right now myself. And that is, you try to take on everything and you don't do a great job at anything. And so how do you decide, how do you decouple what only you can do versus what anybody can do? Not anybody can do, but others can do. And how do you keep it online? And I think you're providing a valuable service to people, and obviously they know it, and they're telling their friends about it. And that's really how a lot of businesses start to grow and spread. So it's great to see you doing so well. The last question I have for you is, what advice do you have for anybody who's looking to get into this area themselves?
I think the biggest thing is to, like I was saying before with networking, to ask more questions than you're answering. I think it's the same thing with getting into any kind of business, is you need to absorb as much as possible all the time and always be learning in the beginning. I mean, I think because social media and marketing and all this online stuff came on so quickly, it's caused a lot of people to get by knowing what they know, maybe as a college student who was one of the first people on Facebook, but that doesn't mean they actually know anything about marketing. It's become clear lately, I would say in the last couple of years, that, who knows what they're talking about, who actually has a background in marketing and who doesn't. But I don't think you have to be one of those, one of those people who's been around forever. You just need to know what you know and know what you don't know, and keep trying to find ways to learn more and be absorbing more than you're putting out. And you can do that in any way. I mean, not everybody is as personally social as I am. You don't have to go to events. You don't have to talk to people if you're more, introverted, but you need to be reading and be listening to podcasts and be watching TED Talks or whatever it is. You need to be doing a lot of that because that's how you start to form your own thoughts and opinions about things. And I mean, I think this is kind of a double-edged sword because I see some people who go and read and listen and watch everything, and then all they do is regurgitate other people's ideas. That doesn't work either. You have to figure out, I think the more you know, the more you can start to hone in on your own experiences and pulling out what you have as your unique value proposition and be able to tell that to the world.
Yeah. So you need to commit to whatever it's going to be and then go through the steps in order to get there. And I think that's really a key is that there's so many ways to handle the same problem, right? We're all looking to do something similar, which is to get people interested in our products or services. That's what I always say, like the fundamental piece of marketing is to get people interested,
right? To
find a market for what we're doing here, right? There's so many ways to do it. And there's so many success stories. There's brand marketing, direct marketing, earned media, paid media, owned media, all these different things, all these terms you might hear in a marketing classroom. But what it comes down to is spending some time in your career, whether it's you do it after a year or if you do it after 5 months or if you do it after 20 years, whatever it is, sort of getting the experiences to see which one is interesting to you, which one you could keep on doing. And then once you get to that point, then commit to doing that. And that is my advice to anybody, right, is just to go after it and then commit to it because then you're going to get the results. Right. It's the people who are on the fence or, oh, maybe I'll do this or maybe should I do social media or should I do that? It's like social media isn't even really it's just it's a channel. It's like a channel right now that happens to have grown really fast and was the Wild West for a while. That's not a strategy, right? That's not the strategy. The strategy is to get people interested.
And I would say to add to that too, don't be afraid don't be somebody else. Be who you are. Figure out what about you is different and unique. And because people, I mean, this is not a new thing to say, but people buy from people. They don't buy from companies. And that's why I think that's a big reason why I've been so successful, because people know I'm here overlooking everything and they know me. I met them at that conference or I sat on this bus with them for 8 hours a day, whatever it is, they know. And that's, anybody, and this is why I say this too, like anybody technically could do the work that we're doing. That's not the value. The value is that somebody has your back or that you get along with me or that you trust me and my team. And that's what you need to figure out, I think, too, is where do you fit in? What's your personal added value to what you're trying to provide? And obviously that doesn't, and then you have to figure out how to scale that, which is, with company culture, with your own processes and all that kind of stuff. But you have to figure that out, what it is about you in the beginning and not just be trying to do what other people are doing because they're already doing that. So don't do it. Yep,
exactly. And when it comes down to it in written form, especially, we all sound the same.
Right.
And it's really hard to read in between the lines. And so that's where the relationship comes in. I'm convinced that in the service business, it's not so much whether you're the best at something, it's whether somebody wants to work with you. And they'd much rather work with somebody who they can trust and who they want to work with than necessarily the best, because it's really hard to pin down what the best is.
I agree. I love it.
Yeah, that's some great advice. It's a great closing point for the podcast episode as well. So I wanted to thank you for joining us, Jess, and I look forward to talking to some other people that you know as well, because it sounds like you're really well connected in this industry.
Definitely. Yeah, this was really great. I really enjoyed talking to you, Jeff, and I will definitely pass the podcast on to some of our other lovely clients and friends and get people listening and hopefully also be guests on the show.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you. What an interesting story. I love the entrepreneurial spirit that Jess has. Jess knew that she wanted to start a business, and she knew that she could do more than her current set of tasks. And that's where most entrepreneurs start. But it's the way she took action that is so inspiring. As a virtual assistant, she built up a client base, took on projects, and it turns out that she was great at her job. So people started talking, she kept on building those relationships, and now she has a business. You may not see Jess's name as a marquee on a website, but I think she prefers it that way. There are many ways to be involved in the business of marketing, and for every celebrity that we see in the marketing world, there are several people and companies like Don't Panic Management that make everything run smoothly. This is what I enjoyed the most about our interview. It wasn't just the story of one person working hard to achieve their dream and constantly raising the bar to success, which we hear all the time. It was about how you can make a difference by doing good for others as well. There are many ways to succeed in this business, and Jess provides perhaps the best example of how we could turn a business idea into a growth engine. And so for that, I thank Jess. For show notes, visit Jeffalytics.com/Jess.
How about a piece of brutal honesty? Two things in life are money and travel. If you are sick of bogus modesty, hear stories of this girl unravel. Hard to believe that guy who made it big for a simple tweet needs half an hour. A pro behind the scenes could help your gig. Don't be afraid, just give her power and sing this song under the shower. Brought to you by your host, Jeff Sauer.